The Hebden Bridge, Enigma by Edwina Longbottom. Chapter 1. The Puzzle of Serenity. Charlotte Jackson was someone who found solace in the simple pleasures of life. As she sat in her cozy living room, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the soft hum of the radio, a sense of peace enveloped her. Her latest achievement, a sprawling 3,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, lay completed on the sturdy oak table by the window. The puzzle depicted Hebden Bridge, a place she had always dreamed of visiting. Its vibrant greens, rolling hills, and charming stone cottages nestled beside a sparkling river seemed almost alive under the golden rays of the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. For weeks, Charlotte had poured herself into this puzzle, working on it after long days managing her small bookshop. Each piece she placed felt like a victory over the chaos of the world outside. With the final piece in place, she had stepped back, letting a triumphant smile spread across her face. She captured the moment with her phone, whispering, "Perfect." As twilight descended, she tidied up the table and prepared for bed, basking in the calm sense of accomplishment. Her dreams that night were peaceful, filled with images of the serene landscape she had pieced together. But her tranquility shattered the next morning. Entering the living room with her usual cup of coffee, Charlotte froze. The puzzle, her masterpiece, was disturbed. 3 pieces lay aside, detached from their places. Her pulse quickened as she stared at the scene. "Joe," she called to her husband over breakfast, trying to mask the unease in her voice. "Did you touch my puzzle last night?" Joe glanced up from his newspaper, fork paused midair. "Your puzzle? I didn't go near it." His expression was one of genuine confusion. Charlotte's mind raced with possibilities. A breeze, vibrations from passing traffic, or perhaps her imagination playing tricks on her, but none seemed plausible. The puzzle had been pristine when she went to bed. Replacing the 3 pieces carefully, she examined the puzzle for any signs of tampering. Though everything appeared normal, an unsettling feeling lingered. It was as if someone was trying to communicate. That day, as she worked in the shop, her thoughts repeatedly returned to the puzzle. By evening, the sense of calm it had once brought her had been replaced by a restless curiosity. Something wasn't right, and Charlotte knew she had to uncover the truth. Chapter 2. The Intrusion. The puzzle became an obsession. Charlotte couldn't stop thinking about the displaced pieces. Every morning for 3 days, she found the same 3 pieces removed and resting to the side. No matter how securely she placed them the night before, they always shifted as though part of a ritual she couldn't comprehend. Charlotte's initial irritation gave way to intrigue. She observed the puzzle with fresh eyes, as if it might reveal its secrets. But nothing seemed unusual about the image. Just Hebden Bridge, its cobblestone streets, ivy-clad cottages, and the calm river cutting through the valley. On the 4th morning, she decided to investigate further. Her first thought was Joe, but his bemused reactions made her doubt he was involved. Still, she wanted to be certain. That night, she set up her phone to record the living room. She positioned it discreetly on a shelf, its lens trained on the puzzle table, and hit record. The following morning, she rushed to retrieve the phone before even checking the puzzle. As expected, the 3 pieces were once again displaced. With her heart pounding, she played the footage. The recording was smooth until about 2:37 a.m., when static briefly interrupted the video. The next frame showed the puzzle with the pieces removed, yet no one was in the room. A chill ran down her spine. Was it a glitch in the camera, or was something else at play? She replayed the video multiple times, trying to find any clue in the shadows or reflections, but there was nothing. That evening, Charlotte decided to share the mystery with her closest friend, Evelyn, a history enthusiast who often indulged in tales of the supernatural. Over tea in Charlotte's kitchen, Evelyn listened intently, her eyes alight with curiosity. 3 pieces, always the same ones? Evelyn asked, tapping her chin thoughtfully. Charlotte nodded. "It doesn't make sense. They're from random parts of the image, nothing connected." Evelyn leaned forward. "Have you ever thought about the house itself? It's an old place, isn't it?" Charlotte hesitated. She'd lived in the cottage for years but had never questioned its history. It was just an old house with creaky floorboards and drafts. "Maybe there's something you're missing," Evelyn said. "Old houses have stories, Charlotte." and sometimes they find ways to tell them. The words lingered long after Evelyn had left. That night, Charlotte resolved to dig deeper into the cottage's past. Chapter 3: Discovery of the Letter. Charlotte's curiosity turned into determination. She spent the next morning researching the history of her home. The cottage, nestled on the edge of Hebden Bridge, was over 150 years old. Though charming and well kept, it bore the marks of time in its creaky floors and weathered stone walls. She ventured into the attic for the first time in years, armed with a flashlight and a sense of purpose. Dust motes swirled in the air as she pushed open the stiff wooden door. The attic was a time capsule filled with forgotten items, a collection of old furniture, yellowed newspapers, and wooden crates stacked haphazardly. In one corner, half hidden under a moth-eaten quilt, Charlotte discovered an old trunk. Its brass fittings were tarnished with age, the wood darkened but intact. Her fingers trembled as she unlatched the rusty lock and lifted the lid. Inside, she found an assortment of items: sepia-toned photographs, faded postcards, and a collection of letters tied together with a ribbon. Each letter was written in elegant handwriting, signed with the name Louisa. One letter in particular caught Charlotte's attention. Its paper was brittle and the ink had smudged in places, but the words were still legible. Hebden Bridge holds my heart, its beauty captured in each brushstroke I lay upon the canvas. Yet my work remains incomplete, for the pieces I need to finish it are lost to me. My longing persists, unresolved, a puzzle of its own. Charlotte's breath caught as she read. Louisa had been an artist, drawn to the same idyllic scenery that now graced the puzzle in her living room. The mention of a puzzle sent a shiver down her spine. Was it merely a metaphor for her life's work, or something more literal? Among the letters, Charlotte found a small sketchbook filled with delicate pencil drawings of Hebden Bridge. Each sketch radiated emotion, as if Louisa had poured her soul into every line. One page was marked with a faint lavender scent, hauntingly familiar. Clutching the letter and sketchbook, Charlotte descended from the attic, her mind racing. She felt an inexplicable connection to Louisa, as though they were linked across time. That evening, she sat by the puzzle, the letter resting beside her. "I'll finish what you started, Louisa," she whispered. The lavender scent returned, faint but undeniable, curling through the air like an unspoken promise. Chapter 4: Unraveling Louisa's Life. The letter from Louisa lingered in Charlotte's thoughts, sparking a deep curiosity about the artist who had once lived in her home. Determined to uncover more, Charlotte set out to explore the town's history. She began with the local library, a small but welcoming place nestled near the town square, its shelves brimming with stories of Hebden Bridge's past. Charlotte approached the librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Harland, who had spent decades curating the library's archives. When Charlotte mentioned Louisa's name, Mrs. Harland's eyes lit up. "Ah, Louisa Mercer," she said, leading Charlotte to a collection of old records. She was quite the talent in her day, though her story is bittersweet. As they pored over the records, Charlotte learned that Louisa had been a celebrated artist in the late 19th century. Her paintings of Hebden Bridge had captured the town's essence, drawing admirers from far and wide. But her life had been marred by tragedy. Louisa lost her fiancé shortly before their wedding, Mrs. Harland explained, her voice tinged with sadness. He drowned in the River Calder during a sudden storm. After that, her work took on a melancholic tone. She poured all her grief into her art, but left many pieces unfinished. Charlotte's heart ached for Louisa. The story added weight to the letter she had found, making her feel even more connected to the artist. Among the records was a photograph of Louisa, her delicate features framed by dark curls. Charlotte couldn't help but notice the determination in her eyes, a strength that seemed to defy the pain she had endured. Later that day, Charlotte visited the local art gallery, where several of Louisa's paintings were on display. The works were breathtaking, each one brimming with emotion. One painting, titled Whispers of the Bridge, featured the same scene as Charlotte's puzzle. The gallery's curator confirmed it was one of Louisa's last works, left unfinished at the time of her death. As Charlotte stood before the painting, a faint scent of lavender filled the air, just as it had in her living room. Her resolve deepened. Completing the puzzle wasn't just about solving a mystery, It was about honoring Louisa's legacy. That night, as she replaced the puzzle's wayward pieces once again, Charlotte felt a strange sense of companionship. "We'll finish this together," she whispered, her voice soft but resolute. Chapter 5: The Puzzle Deepens. The days passed, and Charlotte found herself drawn deeper into the mystery of Louisa's life. Each morning, she awoke to the same three puzzle pieces moved from their spots. Though unnerving at first, she began to see it as a form of communication, a silent urging to uncover more. She spent hours piecing together Louisa's story. Old letters and journals found in the attic painted a picture of a woman torn between love and ambition. One journal entry described Louisa's visits to Hebden Bridge's lush meadows and cobblestone streets, where she sought inspiration for her art. Another hinted at her struggles after her fiancé's untimely death, detailing her obsession with capturing the town's beauty as a way to preserve her happiest memories. One evening, as Charlotte examined the journal more closely, she noticed a faint outline beneath a page. Curious, she held it up to the light and found a hidden sketch, a detailed plan of the same Hebden Bridge puzzle she had completed. The image sent a chill down her spine. It was as if Louisa had intended for the puzzle to be more than a simple work of art, perhaps a message or a symbol of something unfinished in her life. The scent of lavender returned that night, stronger than before. As Charlotte replaced the three displaced pieces, she felt a presence in the room, gentle but insistent. "What are you trying to tell me, Louisa?" she murmured aloud. Determined to find answers, Charlotte visited the Hebden Bridge Historical Society. There, she met Tom, a young historian with an infectious enthusiasm for local lore. When Charlotte explained her discovery of Louisa's journal and the unfinished puzzle, Tom leaned forward, intrigued. "Louisa Mercer's story has fascinated historians for years," he said. "Her art is celebrated, but her personal life remains a mystery. Some say she believed Hebden Bridge held a spiritual energy, a connection between the living and the departed." Charlotte shared the recurring incidents with the puzzle pieces, and Tom's expression grew serious. "Perhaps it's not just about completing the puzzle," he suggested. "It could be about uncovering what's missing in her story. The pieces might be pointing you toward something more." That night, Charlotte couldn't shake Tom's words. She stood before the puzzle, studying the scene as if it might reveal its secrets. The displaced pieces, seemingly random before, began to feel deliberate. What if they weren't just parts of the puzzle, but clues to a larger mystery? As she drifted off to sleep, Charlotte felt the faintest brush of lavender in the air, like a promise that the answers were within reach. Chapter 6: A Step Closer. Charlotte's nights grew restless as the puzzle consumed her thoughts. The recurring pattern of the three displaced pieces now felt like a deliberate invitation. Each time she placed them back, the scent of lavender seemed to linger longer, filling the room with a comforting, ethereal presence. Determined to unravel the mystery, Charlotte revisited Louisa's letters and journals. This time she combed through them more meticulously, hoping to find overlooked details. Her patience was rewarded when she found a cryptic note tucked between two pages of Louisa's journal. "The river flows with secrets untold. Beneath the stones, a story unfolds." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Was Louisa referring to the River Calder? Charlotte's mind raced with possibilities. What secrets could the river hold, and how did they tie into the puzzle? The next morning, Charlotte decided to follow the trail. She took her dog, Poppy, and set out for the riverbank, with the sketchbook and Louisa's journal in hand. The day was overcast, the kind of weather that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. As she walked along the river, Charlotte felt an inexplicable pull toward a specific spot where the water's flow was unusually calm. A large, flat stone jutted out, its surface slick with moss. Kneeling beside it, she traced her fingers over its surface and noticed faint carvings barely visible beneath the grime. Using a handkerchief, she gently wiped away the dirt, revealing the engraving of a date, May 17th, 1892. The significance of the date eluded her, but it was clearly deliberate. She snapped a photo with her phone and noted the location to investigate further. When she returned home, she found the puzzle waiting for her, its serene depiction of Hebden Bridge now feeling less like art and more like a gateway. As she reassembled the displaced pieces for the umpteenth time, her focus shifted to the specific parts they represented, a section of the riverbank. The connection was undeniable. Louisa had left breadcrumbs in her journal, in the engraving by the river, and perhaps even in the puzzle itself. But for what purpose? Charlotte couldn't yet see the bigger picture, but she was certain she was on the right path. That night, as the lavender scent enveloped her, she whispered into the quiet, "I'm listening, Louisa. I'll find what you need me to." Chapter 7. The Unfinished Masterpiece. Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that the engraved date on the river stone was a pivotal clue. The next morning, she returned to the Hebden Bridge Historical Society with the photograph she had taken. Tom, the young historian, greeted her with a curious smile. "You found something new?" he asked, leaning forward eagerly as Charlotte handed him the photo. "Yes," she said, her voice edged with excitement. "It's from the riverbank, near the spot Louisa painted in one of her sketches. Does the date mean anything to you?" Tom studied the photograph, his brow furrowing in thought. "May 17th, 1892, he murmured, flipping through an old ledger he had retrieved from a shelf. After a few moments, his eyes lit up. "Here it is. There was a significant flood that year. It caused massive damage to the town, and several lives were lost, including—" He paused, glancing at Charlotte. "Including Louisa Mercer's fiancé." The revelation hit Charlotte like a bolt of lightning. The flood that had claimed her fiancé's life must have been the tragedy Louisa had written about in her journal. But why would the date be etched into a stone by the river? Tom continued, his tone thoughtful. "There's an old story, local folklore really, that says Louisa spent days by the river after the flood, painting and searching for something. Some say she believed her fiancé's spirit lingered there, tied to the place where he died." Charlotte felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. The pieces of Louisa's story were beginning to fit together, but the puzzle wasn't complete yet. That evening, back in her living room, Charlotte turned her attention to the jigsaw puzzle. She studied the section of the riverbank where the displaced pieces belonged, comparing it to Louisa's sketchbook. As she traced the painted lines, she noticed something she hadn't seen before: a faint outline in the water, barely visible in the artwork. It was a small object, partially obscured by the ripples, a locket perhaps, or a pendant. Charlotte's heart raced. Could this be what Louisa had been searching for? The next day, armed with waders and a sturdy flashlight, Charlotte returned to the riverbank. She searched the area around the engraved stone, her hands trembling as she sifted through the sediment. Hours passed, and just as the light began to fade, her fingers brushed against something solid. Pulling it free, she found a small, tarnished locket etched with delicate floral patterns. She opened it carefully to reveal a faded photograph of a man and a woman, Louisa and her fiancé. Charlotte clutched the locket to her chest, tears welling in her eyes. "I found it, Louisa," she whispered, the lavender scent swirling around her once more, stronger than ever. Chapter 8. The Spirit of Hebden Bridge. The discovery of the locket transformed Charlotte's understanding of Louisa's story. Holding the delicate piece in her hands, she felt a profound connection, as though Louisa herself was standing beside her. The weight of the locket wasn't just physical. It carried the love, grief, and hope that had been frozen in time since 1892. That evening, Charlotte placed the locket on the puzzle table beside Louisa's unfinished scene. She studied the picture of Louisa and her fiancé inside the locket, imagining the joy they must have shared before tragedy struck. The scent of lavender filled the room again, comforting yet bittersweet. Determined to honor Louisa's legacy, Charlotte delved deeper into the story. She spent hours researching the flood of 1892, piecing together newspaper articles and accounts from survivors. Each discovery added a new layer to the narrative, painting a vivid picture of a town united in grief and resilience. Charlotte began to notice subtle changes in her surroundings. The air in the cottage felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. Her dreams were filled with vivid imagery of Hebden Bridge, as it must have been in Louisa's time. Bustling streets, women in flowing dresses, and the sound of laughter carried on the breeze. One night, Charlotte experienced something extraordinary. As she drifted to sleep beside the completed puzzle, she felt herself transported. In her dream, she stood on the cobblestone streets of Hebden Bridge, the sun casting a golden glow over the town. She turned to find Louisa standing nearby, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, her dark curls cascading over her shoulders. Louisa's expression was serene, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You found it," Louisa said, her voice soft and melodic. Charlotte nodded, unable to speak. She felt an overwhelming sense of peace as Louisa extended a hand, gesturing toward the puzzle scene. The unfinished image shimmered before them, and in her dream, Charlotte watched as Louisa added the final brushstrokes to her masterpiece. When Charlotte awoke, the dream lingered like a shadow at the edge of her consciousness. She glanced at the puzzle and the locket resting beside it, feeling an unshakable certainty that she was close to completing Louisa's journey. Hebden Bridge was no longer just a scene frozen in time, it was a living, breathing story. Charlotte was no longer just a spectator, she had become a part of its legacy. Chapter 9. Bridging the Past and Present. The dream stayed with Charlotte, its vivid details etched into her mind. Louisa's serene face, her gratitude, and the act of completing the painting felt more real than anything Charlotte had ever experienced. It was as though Louisa had entrusted her with a mission, not just to uncover the past, but to share it with the present. Charlotte decided to do more than simply solve the mystery. She resolved to celebrate Louisa's story and the beauty of Hebden Bridge through an exhibition that would honor her legacy. It would feature Louisa's art, the locket, and the jigsaw puzzle, now seen not as a simple pastime, but as a bridge connecting two lives across time. Her first step was to gather support. She approached Tom, the historian, and Mrs. Harlan, the librarian, both of whom were immediately enthusiastic. "This could be a wonderful way to remind people of our history," Tom said. "Louisa's story deserves to be shared." The planning began in earnest. Charlotte's small bookshop became a makeshift hub for organizing the exhibition. Neighbors and friends pitched in, offering to help with everything from setting up the venue to spreading the word. Even Joe, who had initially been skeptical about the puzzle's strange occurrences, became involved, helping Charlotte frame the delicate sketches and letters she had discovered. As the exhibition took shape, Charlotte couldn't help but notice the ripple effect Louisa's story was having on the community. People shared their own family histories, rediscovering connections to Hebden Bridge's past. Local artists came forward with their interpretations of Louisa's work, inspired by her dedication and passion. The exhibition was set to take place in the town hall, a grand building with arched windows that overlooked the river. On the day of the event, the hall buzzed with activity as residents and visitors gathered to see the display. At the heart of the exhibition stood the puzzle, framed and lit to highlight its intricate beauty. Beside it were Louisa's sketches, her letters, and the locket, each piece telling a fragment of her story. As Charlotte walked through the crowd, she overheard snippets of conversations about Louisa, the flood, and the mysterious connection between the past and present. For the first time, Charlotte felt the full weight of what she had accomplished. That evening, as the exhibition wound down, Charlotte stood alone before the puzzle. The lavender scent filled the air once more, and a soft, warm breeze seemed to brush against her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing Louisa's spirit had found peace, and perhaps so had she. Chapter 10. The Puzzle Completed. The exhibition was a resounding success. The story of Louisa Mercer and her unfinished masterpiece captivated the town, sparking renewed interest in the history of Hebden Bridge and the lives that had shaped it. Yet for Charlotte, one final step remained, the act of completing the puzzle one last time, this time imbued with a sense of closure. The evening after the exhibition, Charlotte returned home, her heart full yet unsettled. She knew the puzzle was more than just an image. It was a bridge between two lives, two stories. As she sat before it, the room was quiet, save for the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. This time, the act of placing the pieces back into their spots felt ceremonial. The three pieces, which had so often been displaced, lay on the table like sentinels guarding their secret. Charlotte picked up the first piece, her fingers trembling slightly, and placed it carefully into its position. The scent of lavender grew stronger, swirling around her like a comforting embrace. She paused, closing her eyes as the aroma filled her senses, grounding her in the moment. She picked up the second piece and fitted into place. With the final piece in her hand, Charlotte hesitated. A rush of emotions, grief, joy, and a profound sense of connection washed over her. "This is for you, Louisa," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As the last piece clicked into place, something extraordinary happened. A soft golden glow seemed to emanate from the puzzle, illuminating the room in a warm, ethereal light. Charlotte sat back, her breath caught in her throat. The lavender scent was now almost tangible, enveloping her like a delicate veil. The glow faded after a few moments, leaving behind a serene stillness. Charlotte felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of fulfillment, of knowing she had completed something that transcended time. She looked at the puzzle and saw it not as a simple image, but as a testament to Louisa's love, loss, and artistry. The locket lay beside it, a final piece of the story brought to light. As Charlotte sat in the quiet of her living room, a sense of peace settled over her. The connection she had forged with Louisa would remain a part of her, a reminder of the beauty found in honoring the past. Chapter 11. The Exhibition's Legacy. In the weeks following the exhibition, Hebden Bridge seemed to hum with newfound energy. Charlotte's efforts had sparked more than just curiosity about Louisa Mercer's life. It had reignited a sense of community and pride in the town's history. Visitors flocked to see the restored artwork, and the story of the puzzle became a local legend. Charlotte's shop became a gathering place for those eager to share their own stories. People brought in old photographs, letters, and artifacts from their family histories, inspired by Charlotte's journey to uncover Louisa's past. Her quiet bookshop transformed into a hub of local heritage where history was not only remembered but celebrated. One evening, Charlotte sat with Tom and Mrs. Harland in her shop, sipping tea and reflecting on the impact of the exhibition. "You've done something remarkable, Charlotte," Mrs. Harland said, her voice filled with warmth. "You've shown people that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the lives and emotions that connect us all." Tom nodded in agreement. Louisa's story has reminded people that the past is still very much alive. It's in the buildings, the landscapes, and even in something as simple as a puzzle. Charlotte smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Yet she couldn't ignore the subtle longing that lingered in her heart. The journey had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. One morning, as she tidied up the display of Louisa's letters and sketches in her shop, a visitor arrived carrying a small, wrapped package. The woman introduced herself as Clara, a distant relative of Louisa's. "I heard about the exhibition," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know much about Louisa until recently, but your work inspired me to look into my family's history. I found this in an old trunk. It belonged to her." Charlotte unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a small, unfinished painting of Hebden Bridge. It was unmistakably Louisa's work, the brushstrokes vibrant yet incomplete. The sight of it took Charlotte's breath away. "This was meant for her final collection," Clara explained. "I thought you should have it. It seems only fitting that you complete what she started." Tears filled Charlotte's eyes as she accepted the painting. The journey she thought was over now felt like it had a new chapter waiting to be written. That evening, as she gazed at the unfinished painting, Charlotte felt the lavender scent once more, faint but undeniable. She smiled, whispering, "I hear you, Louisa. Let's see this through." Chapter 12. Legacy and Renewal. Charlotte placed the unfinished painting on an easel in her living room, next to the framed puzzle and Louisa's locket. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle, not just the jigsaw, but the larger story she had unraveled. The vibrant yet incomplete brushstrokes seemed to call to her, urging her to finish what Louisa had started. The task felt monumental. Charlotte wasn't an artist, but her connection to Louisa gave her the courage to try. She spent weeks researching painting techniques, studying Louisa's other works to understand her style, and practicing with small sketches. Each attempt brought her closer to Louisa, as if the artist were guiding her hand. One quiet evening, Charlotte finally felt ready. With brushes and paint laid out before her, she began to work. The room was silent, except for the soft rustle of the brush against the canvas. The lavender scent, now a familiar comfort, filled the air as if Louisa's presence was there, encouraging her. Hours passed, and when Charlotte stepped back to examine her work, a wave of emotion washed over her. The painting was complete. Hebden Bridge, with its cobblestone streets, rolling hills, and serene river, came alive on the canvas. It was as if she and Louisa had worked together across time to bring the vision to life. Charlotte framed the painting and added it to the display in her shop, alongside Louisa's sketches and letters. She placed a small plaque beneath it, completed in honor of Louisa Mercer, whose spirit reminds us that art and love transcend time. The painting became the centerpiece of the display, drawing visitors from far and wide. People marveled at its beauty, but more than that, they were moved by the story behind it, a story of connection, perseverance, and the enduring power of art to bridge the gap between past and present. As life in Hebden Bridge returned to its steady rhythm, Charlotte found herself renewed. She continued to seek out puzzles, but now they were more than a pastime. They were potential gateways to stories waiting to be discovered. One evening, as she sat by the fire with a new puzzle spread before her, she felt a sense of quiet anticipation. Louisa's journey had ended, but Charlotte's was far from over. The past, she had learned, always had more to reveal for those willing to listen. And so the enigma of Hebden Bridge lived on, not just as a tale of mystery and love, but as a testament to the enduring connections between people, places, and the stories that shape us all.